Reverend Casey.
Thanks, y'all. Good morning. I am so grateful to be here. This is the very first time that since I've been on the Global Themes team that I've had an opportunity to speak about a theme that I wrote about. So for me, thank you. It's super exciting. I found this Love Out Loud shirt on Walmart like 2 days, I would say it was like 2 weeks after we declared Love Out Loud as the theme for the year. And I was like, I'm gonna put this somewhere so that in September it's still black and not faded. And I'm very happy that I just ran, because like I made this decision and I said global themes, like we set this like a year and some change ago. So like I really put this shirt away and I'm grateful that I came across it to remind me to wear it again in September. So this shirt's making its debut. So this theme of love on a spectrum, I am not going to be one of those jerks that post myself on a Sunday morning. I'm not doing that. So what I really did for this is I dug into some of the books that I posted for reference. And when I wrote September's content, at the time I was working full-time as a case manager at CCU Youth Services and running teams all over Oklahoma City. It was very difficult for me to carve out the time to sit down and write this content. And so I just kind of like did it in between sessions, and I did it over the course of 2 hours, sat down one time for 1 hour and one time another time. And so I haven't had the opportunity to dig into the general themes until now. So it was really nice for me to do that. And I especially love that, I speak here on the second Sunday of every month, and although, like, FYI, some of you are thinking, like, hey, didn't I see you 2 weeks ago? I was traveling all over in August, so it ended up being the last Sunday of the month just because that was the one Sunday I was in Oklahoma City at the time. And so, but this point forward, I've got no second Sunday plans other than being here. As long as I'm planning to stay in Oklahoma City, I will be here second Sunday for the foreseeable future. And I love that Love on a Spectrum happens to fall on this week where I am scheduled to speak, specifically because I feel like I am the product of Love on a Spectrum. That my parents were married. I should say my parents' first date was in 1971. And that was 1 year after Loving versus Virginia made it so that interracial marriage was even legal. And personally, my last marriage was in 2011, and gay marriage wasn't legal until 2013. So I know what it's like to to lead with love, regardless of the fact that my country of origin doesn't support love on a spectrum, and I'm grateful that my parents set this example for me. The reason I know that their first date was a year after Loving versus Virginia is because they told me when I was a child. So I got to really learn about the challenges that they faced, the way that they overcame those challenges, and it really helped me navigate my experience of being queer at a time when being queer was really demonized. That I came out in like 99, and in 1999 there was a lot of anti-gay rhetoric was really at the forefront of American conversation. So being an 18-year-old, and when I say I came out, it wasn't that I came out, it was that I kind of realized I was gay around 16, leaned into it at 17, and as a teenager, in my parents' house, I got caught. And so there were things, that just became reality. Like when I graduated from college, hadn't told my extended family, but I was the president of the LGBT organization. I had a rainbow tassel on my graduation hat, and the person I was dating at the time was at the graduation dinner, and one of my aunts said to her, how did you meet Karen? So I went by Karen in those days. How did you meet Karen? And she said, an organization. And she was like, what kind of organization? And my mom just jumped in and was like, the gay organization. Karen Jared is president of the gay organization. I left my whole family like, what? So things like that would happen. You know, like it wasn't like I made this conscious decision to tell people, is that I was living my best life, and as people learned by me just living my best life, I kind of had to deal with the fallout of that. And I'm grateful that my parents really gave me that structure, that understanding that blazing a trail isn't easy, but it's worth it. So one of the books that I used for reference today is Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime. Trevor Noah was born a crime. Apartheid was the lay of the land in South Africa, and as a mixed race person, it was criminal for a black person and a white person to be together. So Trevor Noah's mere existence was criminal in South Africa. And what he says about this experience, about living in apartheid, is the genius of apartheid was convincing people who were the overwhelming majority to turn on each other. As we are having conversations about inclusivity and equality, which we're having more in the United States than I've ever experienced since I've been alive, that there is efforts of making the majority turn on each other, of not seeing the fact that we are all the Messiah, as Reverend Sue Ellen said in her reading, that each one of us is a divine expression of God. And one of the things that I love so much about the Centers for Spiritual Living is this is not a safe place to identify God for yourself, but to also see the God in each other, regardless of how we express, regardless of how we identify. And I feel so honored to have this opportunity to remind the Centers for Spiritual Living on a global scale that this is who we are, that this is what we are about, and the value of having a theme dedicated to this reality demonstrates that even though things like apartheid have existed within our recent future, many of us were alive at the time that apartheid was alive and well in South Africa. Many of us experienced, got to witness what was happening. And also, you know, as I said, my parents got together a year after interracial marriage was legalized in this country. That marriage equality was legalized in this country in 2013. Right now, we're having some very important conversations about representation, visibility, healthcare, and love and support towards transgender people. And I'm grateful that these conversations are taking place so that we are moving in the direction towards being a safe space and an inclusive country for all. So even though apartheid was in the 90s, I do want to note that today in the United States, I read this in this book called The New Jim Crow, which I don't remember if I put in the Global Themes content or not for this month, but this reality is something that I do my best to think about as often as possible. In this book, The New Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander says, the United States imprisons a larger percentage of its black population than South Africa did at the height of apartheid. So today, in 2023, there are more black people in our mass incarceration systems than there were during apartheid in South Africa. And I've also, same thing, this book also talks about how basically the mass incarceration system is modern day slavery. And when I was a child sitting in the classroom learning about the history of slavery, I remember thinking, I wonder what I would do if I lived in a time like this. If I was somebody who could have done something, what would I have done? Would I have just resigned to my fate? Would I have stood up for myself? Would I have tried to help other people? What would I have done? And in being an adult in 2023, I get to see that I don't do as much as my little kid self would have hoped that I would have done. And so as I'm recognizing that, as I'm seeing love on a spectrum, I'm recognizing that it is what's mine to do, it feels like mine to do, not speaking for y'all, is to do what I can to address this, to point it out, to say that I don't think it's okay that's my personal opinion, I don't think it's okay for the United States to have 25% of people who are incarcerated, for them to be in this country alone. I don't think it's okay that the way that we treat poverty and mental health is by locking people away and stripping their right to vote and creating all of these barriers for them to find work after they're released from prison. I don't think the mass incarceration system is designed from a place of love, and I do think that what it is trying to do is to point that out and to do what I can to look for opportunities to speak up, to participate in whatever that shift looks like so that we're addressing this and dismantling the mass incarceration system. I don't know what it is, but I do know that it's important to talk about, that it's important to think about, that it's important not to forget about. And so as I was thinking about Trevor Noah being an expression of somebody who was born a crime, I thought it was important for us to remember that experience, that some things that feel like they were decades ago, or yes, we've made all of these incredible advancements, but this mass incarceration situation is something that is giant that we rarely talk about and we rarely look at. And the experience of love on the spectrum means that love shows up in ways that don't necessarily look comfortable and are not necessarily easy. And glaring challenges that are present within our culture are lights to shine to allow for us to shift. That the issue with mass incarceration is involved with all of these other things in regards to systemic racism and the way that poverty is dealt with in this country. So there are all of these underlying challenges that need to be looked at, and one of the reasons that inspired me to do the work that I did at CSU Youth Services is doing what I can to kind of address that root cause, to help prevent those youth from ending in the mass incarceration system by giving them the resources and the support that they need to live independently. So that's the way that I look at it. Whatever is yours to do, I fully support. FYI, I just had a conversation with the volunteer coordinator at CSU Youth Services, and they said, hey, do you think anybody at United Life would be open to donating meals for CSU? And I said, yeah, I bet they would. So I'm just letting y'all know that the volunteer coordinator is thinking about y'all. So if anybody is interested in donating some meals, let me know. So that's the race part of things. Like I said, I've got all kinds of love on the spectrum showing up in my own personal identity. So that was the race part. And I'm going to move on to the way that we connect that love works as relationships. We live in a predominantly heteronormative, monogamous society. Most of us were born in an environment that says that you marry someone who is of the opposite sex, and you are with that one person for the rest of your life. That is kind of what we are socialized to lean into and aspire to. So people like my parents who followed that concept, but also said, I'm open to the possibility. I'm not going to stick with the fact that it is not socially acceptable for me to be with somebody of a different race. I'm going to follow my heart, follow my love, and they got together and they had me, and we're happily married for 25 years. But the experience of monogamy is something that just doesn't work for everyone. Janet W. Hardy and Dossie Easton wrote a book whose title I'm not going to say with an 8-year-old in the room. That in this book, she said, we are told that monogamy is normal and natural. If our desires do not fit into that constraint, we are morally deficient, psychologically disturbed, and going against. One of the reasons that I am so grateful to have this conversation with y'all on a Sunday is I don't think we talk enough. Like I said, we don't talk enough about mass incarceration, but we never talk about polyamory. I've never been in a spiritual service where polyamory, even as a concept, was brought up. So to have an opportunity to remind each one of us that just because the culture that we're born into says monogamy is the way, that's not necessarily true for everyone. And that we don't need to think of people who practice ethical polyamory as people who are psychologically disturbed and morally deficient. One of the things, again, like I said, about the Centers for Spiritual Living being a safe place for everyone is that somebody who openly practices polyamory, this is a safe place for them to show up and bring all of their partners. As I mentioned, being queer really helped me look outside of the box. And another gay minister said this to me once, that when we're willing to look outside of the box around what society says is okay for us to navigate our experience of love, that we open that up and we widen it up. So I can tell you firsthand, personally, that monogamy is a choice for me. I do not choose to be in monogamous relationships because I feel like I have to be. I tried it in my 20s, and I don't have the emotional capacity to make two people happy at once. I don't have it. I'm a people pleaser, and I didn't have it. And so I got to know firsthand, this is not for me. Never doing this again. And it wasn't about the people involved. It was truly, this is too much work. And all of the polyamorous people that I know have very intense schedules, and it feels like being polyamorous is like a full-time job. And it's not for me. But the people who it's for, I love that the Centers for Spiritual Living gets to be a safe place for them. That I do what I can to help magnify and make it very clear that these are conversations that we get to have at church. This isn't something that we have to hide from. This is a place that we don't tell you, we don't define what normal means for you and say you have to fit in this box to show up here and be yourself. You can't be yourself if somebody else is telling you who you are, how you choose to express is unnatural. I'm going to take some water on that for a minute. That idea, when I think about polyamory, I think about how there are so many songs on the radio about somebody cheating and somebody mad. And I thought about, if polyamory was normalized, all of these people out here cheating could be open about the fact that monogamy is not for them. Because we live in a culture where polyamory is not normalized, people who are probably naturally polyamorous make their best, do their best to fit into a monogamous relationship. It doesn't work, their partner gets mad, and they have this situation over and over and over again. And I feel like 2023 is a good time for us to be having this conversation about breaking those norms and celebrating, honoring, and lifting people up who choose to express love in their own way, choose to blaze their own trail, and redefine what normal and natural means for us. Janet Mock, I mentioned transgender folks earlier. Janet Mock is one of the pioneers of transgender representation on television. I believe that she was the first transgender correspondent on CNN, and she wrote a book called Redefining Realness. And in this book, she said, I have to be honest with myself about the totality of my experience and opening it up to the world, even if the story disclosed only a facet of my journey was a gift. She says this about the experience of writing her book and how she didn't want to be the poster child for transgender people. I never want to be the poster child of mixed race queer who thought ministers, but there's not a lot of us. And so, it's what comes along with it, and recognizing the gift of having an opportunity to blaze the trail, to have the difficult conversations, to serve by example, so that other people don't have to blaze the trail behind you, that there is a trail, that there is a path, and that the experience of being authentic doesn't feel like such a struggle, doesn't feel like a crime. And these trailblazers are what allow for these experiences not to be a crime. The reason that interracial marriage is legal in this country is because somebody sued the government. The reason that marriage equality is the lay of the land because somebody sued the government. So somebody blazed this trail so that queer people are able to marry without giving it a second thought. That in 2023, as I mentioned, working at this youth shelter, a good 50% of the clients that we serve identify as LGBT+. And each one of those youth, many of them don't even have to think about what the process of having their relationships and their identity recognized. Although Oklahoma is a very different situation. Many of you know I'm from Chicago. I moved here from LA, and LGBT plus people live a life of freedom that Oklahomans are still actively fighting for and advocating for. Like many of you know that there is anti-trans legislature on the books. This all ages drag show that Addison announced that we're having on September 30th is suddenly controversial. When we had our very first one where Charlie was our performer, that's why Addison mentioned Charlie. Charlie's actually the reason why we had the show. Charlie was 17 at the time, and there was nowhere to perform in Oklahoma City. And so we created this drag show as an opportunity for Charlie to perform and for to raise money for the center. Win, win, win. We had an incredible turnout, incredible support from the community, no kind of political backlash at all whatsoever, because nobody was talking about anti-drag bills in 2021, 2 years ago, when we hosted that very first show. And now, all of a sudden, that it's a political issue. We had challenges like our sign advertising the all ages drag show, the last 5 were vandalized. And one of our congregants stood up and offered to pay for security to help make sure that the performers felt safe. So we're definitely having these conversations and doing this work here in our community, and thank you so much for that congregant for helping make sure our performers felt so safe. Thank you for that. So as I've been spinning and feel, like I said, excitement and joy and writing down these quotes, I emailed Revlin a couple of days ago. Saturday, kind of jerk am I to email a minister on a Saturday. Friday and Saturday are her 2 days off, but usually Thursday she works leaves around 4 on Thursday, and at 3:57 I was like, oh, I did not email these quotes, and I was like, well, I'm just going to give myself a couple days, and I'm just going to send it, and I'm so grateful that you made it out to the slideshow. Thank you.
And I forgot to bring the laptop home, so they got handled this morning.
Fans, I appreciate it very much. Thank you so much. So the kind of last quotes that came to me is I've been binging the show, The Morning Show, on Apple TV. And the show concept is kind of like the Today Show, that scandal with Matt Lauer. When Matt Lauer was booted off the Today Show, this show's really inspired by that, and Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon star in it. And in an episode in season 2, Reese Witherspoon said something on the air that really struck me. So that's what I wrote down and wanted to share with all of you. She said, transition for society is rarely easy. Reconciling who we were with who we are, with who we want to be, is challenging. Figuring out what from the past we need to remember, to forgive, to learn from, or to ignore is impossible to do elegantly. I really love this, how clear that's impossible to do elegantly. The experience of addressing mass incarceration, the experience of moving in the direction towards marriage equality and having marriage equality be the lay of the land. It was not an elegant situation. And this conversation that we're having around transgender visibility and rights, the experience hasn't been elegant. These anti-drag bills are not elegant. But the experience, this transition is not easy. And that experience of identifying what from the past do we take, what do we learn, what do we release, that process, healing, is challenging and messy and difficult. In May, our theme was finding the light in the shadow, because there's this recognition that it's not just, we don't live this life where there's just lightness. You've got to move through the dark. It is always darkest before the dawn, right? It's about finding the light at the end of the tunnel. The experience of lightness comes from exploring the dark, comes from exploring the shadow, and that experience is messy. And so it is impossible to do elegantly. Love is impossible to experience elegantly. I am sure I am not the only person who's ever been in a relationship that has not looked elegant 100% of the day at the time. Like, our experience of love is not elegance. And right now, that's what we're going through, right? We're in a messy phase around certain things. We're in a much cleaner phase around other things. And I'm grateful for everything that has been transpired up until now. I'm grateful for all of the trailblazers that have made the path easy and clear for other people coming afterwards. And I'm grateful for all of the trailblazers moving forward that are making the path easy and clear for those who come behind. The people who are planting trees that they will not live long enough to experience and enjoy the shade. I want to close with an Ernest Holmes quote, because we got to be traditional, right? Ernest Holmes did found the science mind, and what he says about love is the essence of love, while elusive, pervades everything, fires the heart, stimulates the emotions, renews the soul, and proclaims the spirit. And I have a lot of respect for the fact that he pointed out that love can be elusive. That regardless of the fact that it pervades everything, it's still elusive. We have to move through the experience of the darkness. We have to go through the hard parts to get to the light. So, I invite you to take a moment to get comfortable, to settle in, and let's know this together in prayer. Thank you for being here, Joe. For getting my clue. Appreciate it. So I invite you once again to just settle in. Grateful for the fact that we got comfortable seats here. Bringing our conscious attention and awareness to the breath. Remembering that this breath is what we all have in common. That love may operate on a spectrum, but breath is the same. We all inhale, we all exhale. We all have an opportunity to choose to be conscious of that breath, or we can allow ourselves to be breathed. And I'm grateful that each one of us chooses to navigate life consciously, chooses to define what God means for ourselves, chooses to actively participate in spiritual community and show up authentically, to live and love out loud. So wherever we are on this spectrum of love, whether we are blazing trails or enjoying the trails blazed by the people before us, I'm grateful to trust and know that we are exactly where we are meant to be, doing exactly what it is that we are meant to be doing. And the world is a better place because we are in it. I am grateful to know that, to declare it, and I invite us all to affirm this truth together by saying, and so it is.
So it is.